Hello guys, and welcome to a new Steel Division video today by me, Vulcan. Today I have for you the battle group overview for the Panzer-Lehr, and I just thought today would be Panzer-Lehr day, and since the last video I put up was a Panzer-Lehr gameplay, I thought it was only apt that I come at you with the battle group overview for the Panzer-Lehr straight after. So here we are, and this is a deck I don't particularly like at all, and I don't think that it's necessarily a deck I've fully worked out yet. However, I will give it a shot, and I will talk you through my choices, what I think is good, how you should play this deck in my opinion, and what's worked out for me so far. I don't play the deck too often, so I haven't had much chance to play around with things, but I have made quite a few changes since the gameplay that I put up recently. And therefore I'll be talking through all of those as we move on. So let's start off by jumping into Recon. So Recon in this deck is one of the most important parts of the deck. The main thing that can kill your strong tanks in phase B and C are AT guns, and that means you want to spot them. You want to make sure that you can neutralize them before that happens, and therefore having Recon is the way to do it. And in this deck, I think there's also another role for Recon. That's providing you with more infantry than you would otherwise have if you just had your phase A infantry, right? Because you can get Spear Troop, and these are arguably one of the most important squads to bring in on the Recon tab. I was talking to Mbets, who plays with me in a few of my games, and he has added quite a few of these. I think he has all 3 cards of these on his deck, which to me, I was wondering why I hadn't done it sooner. It makes sense to basically bolster your front line with 4-man Recon squads, because not only can they use that Recon very high optics to spot AT guns, but also have a machine gun to help you defend, right? And the way that the Panzer-Lehr works is you defend in phase A and B, and then you slam the enemy in phase C with all of your high-tech equipment. So yeah, using the Spear Troop to hold that front line and then Recon for you was a fantastic idea, and I've since added 2 cards of them to my own deck. The reason I have 1 card of Aufklärer is because they have the very good stealth, which allows them to remain hidden. Actually, the Spear Troop have very good stealth as well. But the best thing about the Aufklärer is they're cheap as well. So 2-man squad, cheap, can get your Recon information. They also come with the Kubel MG, which is actually reasonably useful at 600 meter range. So yeah, I don't know. I just think I like Aufklärer. Ignore my reasoning for them having very good stealth over the Spear Troop. That's not true. They just are cheaper in this case. Otherwise, I would probably take another card of Spear Troop. But yeah, Spear Troop, these can fill out your front lines in phase A. Further to that, you can get your hands on some SBW234, and these are nice 20mm autocannon units. Their armament is pretty damn strong. They have 4 front armor as well, and they have the high recon capability. I wouldn't necessarily bring these in at the start of the game. However, if you end up somehow punching a hole in the enemy line, bringing in these to take advantage of that can be something you can do. One thing that you can do in phase A as well is bring in these SBW2342 Pumas, and these are 110 point recon units, pretty expensive, but they have 10 AP and they are 2-star veterancy, which is damn impressive. With a 5 accuracy gun with 3 experience, like 3-star experience with like a command unit nearby, these guys can hit hard for sure, but just be careful with them. They are pretty brittle. If they get hit, they die, because 4 front armor is not very much, especially against like an AT gun, for example, and the AT gun will be able to hit you from out of the range you can spot it, so be wary of that. These guys aren't able to see the AT guns before they hit them, so you almost need to provide some Spear Troop to run forwards and spot the AT guns before you move these guys in. So I wouldn't recommend buying these at the start of the game either, unless you're going for some crazy rush for some reason. But either way, yeah, Pumas, what you want to do is just keep them until you're dealing with heavier armor. So if you're coming up against maybe an M4 Sherman, bring in a couple of these, and you can probably outmaneuver the Sherman to the point where you can get a side shot with at least one of them, and that will do you nicely. You can also bring them in to kill Stuarts and other light armor that you might be struggling with. So there's that as well. Puma, really nice vehicle. Same with the 2, 3, 4, 1. This guy's good for punching holes in the enemy, and great for close range fighting really with infantry. That autocannon can tear them to shreds. So yeah, make use of these motorized recon, but most of the recon tab should be used for infantry in my opinion, just to fill out the ranks. And you can pick up 233s, and these guys are fantastic for helping your Tigers at long range because they have 9 HE power. Currently I've removed them from my deck. I'm tempted to put them back in because you do get a lot of them. You get 3 availability in phase B, and they're great for supporting like a King Tiger against AT guns, because you use these guys to bait out the AT guns and then kill them with these because they have 9 HE power. Very quickly stun enemy AT guns. Right, let's move on to infantry. Infantry is pretty simple in this deck. I take 4 cards of infantry in phase A because you don't get much availability on the cards. So you only get 2 Panzergrens per card, which is horrific. Panzergrenführer, I was very tempted not to bring command infantry at all, since you can get support command, but you can't get any support command in phase A, and you can't get any command tanks in phase A. So you almost need to have Panzergrenführer in order to provide you with veterancy in the early game. You want to keep these guys as safe as possible. Don't let them die, because they are your only bet at having higher experience units in phase A. And 2-star Panzer Grenadiers can hold their own, so make sure you have these guys nearby, but not close enough to get themselves killed. Panzer Grenadiers, these guys will do the job. They are 55-point squad because you come with a 20-point half-track, and basically what you want to do is use these guys defensively in phase A alongside your MG42s. So I've brought in 4 availability of Panzer Grenadiers and then 1 card of MG42s. And that's pretty much my infantry for phase A. And the reason I do that is because you need to have infantry available in phase B and C in order to support your tanks. So even if you're losing, say, your infantry in phase A, you're being pressured really hard and you lost all your infantry, you have the reinforcements coming in phase B and phase C with a much higher availability, and that allows you to continue to actually use the effectiveness of your tanks. Because without infantry on your flanks whilst you're moving like a KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZbx forwards, it's gonna die, because it allows the opponent to get AT guns into position that would otherwise be covered by that infantry. That's something that you definitely have to be fully aware of whilst playing this deck. So moving into phase B, I don't take more Panzergrenführer. You can basically substitute those with SBW 232s where you need to. However, you do need at least some infantry to reinforce you in phase B, and since you can only get 3 cards of MG42s and 3 cards of Panzer Grenadiers are just more versatile in my opinion than an MG42. So I just like to have Panzergrens as a phase B unit. And then moving into phase C, you can get cards of 6 infantry. So this is where you need at least 1 card of these, so you can use Pioneers to, again, cover off your heavier tanks as they come in. So you're going to be bringing in Königstigers in phase C, right? And you need to have infantry either side of them to make sure that they don't get flanked by either a bazooka squad or just an AT gun in general. Sturm Pioneers just don't have a place to fit in the deck, and Pioneer Führers with the 2-star 251-9, it's fantastic, but there's not space for it. There's just not space for it. With the availability that you need in phase A, you need to use up 4 card slots just to bring in enough to hold the line. And then in phase B, you need at least 1 card just to reinforce yourself. And in phase C, this is just your tank support unit. So there you go. And that's pretty much my infantry tab for Panzer-Lehr. Moving into the tank tab, you'll see this might surprise quite a few people. I do have all the Königstigers available now, so all of these chaps are in my deck. I love the way the commander looks so funny. I hope they fix that because it's really derp. But yeah, these Königstigers, they are probably your best bet. Just don't fall into the trap of letting them get killed or side shot by stuff. As soon as one of these comes onto the field, what's going to happen is it's going to get targeted by everything you could ever think of. So artillery is getting hit by like Typhoon ATs and like rocket planes and bombers and all sorts of stuff. They're just going to try and keep this thing pinned down as much as possible so that it's not effective. And if this happens, it's not going to be effective. So I do have some other options here. In Phase B, I start with 2 Befehl Panzer IVs. These guys, I think, are important for a mid-range tank for Phase B. Also helps you prep for Phase C and when you have to bring in your Königsdaggers. Because, like a Panzer IV, Befehl Panzer IV is the command unit. So that can provide the command radius to your Königsdaggers as you move forwards. Also, they can hold their own because they have 3 machine guns that stun very quickly, as well as a 4 HE power gun, and they're 2-star veterancy. So they're very strong, actually, these Befehl Panzers, and they can really help you out in the mid-game. Aside from that, if you're struggling against something a bit more heavy, like somebody's brought in some Fireflies, then you can match that with some Befehl Panthers, but they do cost significantly more, so 280 points apiece. And since you're only going to be getting, you know, your, let's see, 950 points in Phase B, that's going to be 2 cards of these is literally 600 points worth of tanks, or not quite, but there we go. It's close enough. Math is hard. 560 points of your 950 from Phase B. And that's an issue, right? You're not going to end up ever bringing in all of your Phase B tanks. So what I end up doing is waiting for Phase C in this case, and I have Panther A's available here. And these are basically the same tanks as the Befehl Panther in terms of stats. The Panther A is exactly the same in terms of statistics. It just doesn't have the command, and it's slightly slower. Furthermore, it does have 1 less veterancy, but with a Befehl Panther nearby, a Panzer IV, or even a SBW232, you can make it a 2-star Panther A, which is fine and more than good enough. So yeah, this is what I have to supplement my availability in Phase C, because as you can see, I don't actually have many tanks. I don't fill 3 of the tank tap. The other thing I do have in Phase B is a Königsdagger. The only reason I really have it in here is, for example, if I'm not being put too much pressure on in Phase A, then I might actually have a chance to save for this in Phase B, which shouldn't happen, but sometimes it does. And then you roll out the King Tiger and start popping things left, right, and centre before they have the availability to actually, stun it and do too much to it, because they've probably invested points in other things. They weren't really expecting a Königsdagger to roll up, and, well, I don't know. In most cases, when you're playing against Panzer-Lehr, you expect King Tigers eventually. But if you can get this out pretty quickly, like straight into Phase B, then you're doing well. But that's unlikely to happen because you're most likely having your ship pushed in by some serious pressure in Phase A. Anyway, Panther A, yeah, Königsdaggers, that's my deck that's my armor in this tab. Now, let's just talk about the other choices quickly. So there are Panzer IVs available, and I can see why some people might focus on these in Phase B, because alongside a Befehl Panzer IV, that's a 2-star Panzer IV, right? And they are decent, like I said, they're okay. 14 AP power is more than enough to deal with most allied armor in Phase B, so they can be strong snipers. You can also get Tiger E's and Befehl Tigers. Befehl Tigers and Tiger E's have exactly the same statistics. It's just the Befehl Tiger has the leader available, and the Tiger E's, they just have more availability on each pack. Now a 3-star Tiger E, I guess that's another difference, is although they both have the same experience, the Tiger E can actually be upgraded to a 3-star Tiger, which is actually pretty scary. Like a 3-star Tiger E is a sniper, right? It has 12 front armor as well, which is enough to bounce most Shermans. However, if you find anything bigger, like 16-pounders, we actually have a pretty decent chance to pen at max range, so you got to be careful about that, and that's why I don't necessarily bring them in. I much prefer having the 14 front armor of like a Befehl Panther, and they're just as much snipers as a Tiger E. So, yeah, I just think Befehl Panthers, they're just in general better. than a Tiger E, although I can see why people would bring in Tiger E's and make them 3 stars and see them as snipers. But either way, that's those accounted for. As for the Panther D's, I don't know, they just don't have that extra armor that the Befehl Panthers do, and you're never going to be bringing in 3 of those in Phase B, and then you're going to be bringing in Panther A's in Phase C, so Panther D's are just kind of pointless in this deck. As we move on to support, you'll see that I do have 258s to begin with, and these are pretty much needed to provide you with the extra fire support in Phase A that you will most definitely need. They can crush, you know, any infantry unit at max range. You can engage AT guns with these, and 2 shots should stun an AT gun. So if you have a couple of these next to each other and an AT gun fires at you, you can pin that down and possibly kill it quite easily. They're only 45 points and they come with a 9 HE power gun. Really nice unit at the moment, and definitely worth having in Panzer-Lehr to help you defend in Phase A. It's as simple as that. As for the Opel Blitz munitions, I have some of those because you need supply eventually for your your machine guns, and also the autocannons, especially on these SPW-232s that I actually bring in Phase B. So these guys are 2-star SPW-232s. They rip to shreds infantry and light vehicles. They are so good. As well as that, they are the best units, in my opinion, for supporting a King Tiger, because they take care of that infantry and AT threat very quickly if something shows itself at close range. So if you have one of these escorting your King Tiger, it can take care of the pesky units that pop up beside you. Moving on in the Panzer-Lehr support tab, you can get extra Opel Blitz munitions. You can also get these KYAZd 251-21s with the 3 15mm autocannons next to each other. They have 10. It has 10 HE power. Pretty decent unit, honestly, but just doesn't really find a place in the deck, especially instead of like a 258, which I just find so much more useful because of the extra range. Then in Phase B, you can get some grills, which would be nice if you had the extra slots for them, and maybe the Flampanzers with the, you know, 2-star experience, maybe they would be nice as well. Like, you would demolish infantry with these guys in Phase C, but just doesn't work out. It just doesn't work out because you just need the slots for the SPW-232s. You need the command units, and these command units will do just as good as a job as the 251-16 will do. And this thing needs to get so much closer to actually decimate infantry, whereas the 232 doesn't, because it has 800 meter range on its autocannon. So that's pretty much my support tab and the reasoning for that. If we move on to the anti-tank tab, this is very much based around using Pak 38s in the early game. It's also very tempting for me to bring in Panzerschrecks as well, because by the time you get to Phase B, these Pak 40s aren't that useful. However, they do have a use, which is why I currently sit them. Panzers, maybe not. Maybe I should be swapping these fellas out, but I find if somebody's spamming M10s, Panzers are just way more cost efficient than any other tank on the deck. Either way, Pak 38, this is like your staple AT in Phase A, and you should have 2 cards of these, because you're going to have like pressure put on you from all points at the start of the game. Somebody knows you're playing Panzer-Lehr, they're going to put pressure on you, and the only way you can stop that pressure, especially from vehicles, is from having AT guns, and that's the way that I do it. So I have AT guns pretty much supporting every position on the map that has some form of infantry nearby. So there you go. That's my reasoning for having the Pak 38s in Phase A, and I think they're necessary in pretty much every deck. Like, having some form of like decent AT in Phase A and having enough of it is pretty important. Panzerschrecks, again, I can see why people would use these, and I'm very tempted to like swap out the Jagdpanzers for Panzerschrecks, but I'll tell you why I don't when I get there. Pak 40s, these guys are anti-tank snipers. So say you've got an AT gun and you spot it with a recon squad. Okay, you don't want to be engaging that with a tank because there's a 50, well, maybe not a 50-50 chance, but a chance that that AT gun could kill your tank or kill your vehicle, whatever's trying to engage it, right? Before you actually get the kill. So what you can do is bring up like a Pak 40, for example, and fire at those AT guns from 1,200 meter range with the 4 HE power and start to do damage to those AT guns from max range. Yes, you can do this with a mortar, but this is like direct fire and very high suppression. So, and also much more accurate, right? It's just a very nice way to deal with AT from distance because your AT gun itself won't be targeted by most allied AT guns because they don't have HE power. Even like the 17 pounder, for example, which is the only massive threat to the Panzer-Lehr in Phase C, you know, it doesn't have HE power, so you can use a Pak 40 to harass them. Furthermore, Pak 40, 13 AP power, more than good enough to kill most allied armor as well, so there's that use as well. Then we move on to Phase C, and I have 3 Jagdpanzers. So I already kind of mentioned this, but yeah, M10 spam is the reason that I have Jagdpanzers. If you're playing like against a French deck, or any deck that uses a lot of M10s, Jagdpanzers are so good. So good, because they have 14 front armor, which is more than the 13 AP that a lot of Wolverines get. And also, like, for example, against the 3rd armored, Jagdpanzers are amazing. 1,200 meter range, 12 AP power is more than enough to kill Shermans, and 14 front armor is more than enough to stop it getting killed by Shermans. So you win-win, you know, like, it's great. The 3rd armored has no more than 13 AP power on its tanks, and the French are the same. And Jagdpanzers counter both of those decks very cost efficiently compared to a KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZbx, which costs twice as much, right? I would rather have 2 Jagdpanzers just ripping Shermans to shreds than KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZbx. You know, like one KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZ that somebody's going to focus to death. Just, yeah, that's just the reason I have them in here. Then I would love to have like an extra slot for Ricardo Panzerstrex because I feel like they would be great for helping you like ambush units in Phase A. But unfortunately they don't find that space. As we move on to anti-air, this is pretty light, honestly. I think Flak 88s are important in Phase C for stunning units that might be trying to harass your King Tiger. So, for example, Typhoon ATs are a great example. 2 hits from a Flak 88, I believe, will force a Typhoon AT to fall back. And they are a big threat to like King Tigers, side armor and rear armor. They can kill them. So you have to be careful about that. And also just stunning them in the first place. It leaves you vulnerable to your King Tiger falling back and just going wherever the hell it wants, showing side armor, rear armor, whatever, and getting itself killed. It's like the easiest way to kill a King Tiger is just make it fall back to the point where it shows its side armor or rear armor, and then it dies. Then I have some Flak 36s in Phase B. These are not only to help me support the skies, but also support the ground moving into Phase B. Pretty nice unit to have about, pretty cheap actually for what they can do. And just stop like overwhelming aircraft in Phase B, honestly. Pretty well. Now the other units that you can bring in on this deck are Flak 38s, the 20 mils. 3 HE powers, not good enough in my opinion. Same with the Gepards, 3 HE power, just I don't see them being that useful. However, the KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZ with the Wirbelwind gun, the quad flak filling, is really nice actually. The trouble is it comes on a vehicle. I wish it didn't come on a vehicle because I'd probably bring in some cards of them, but they do, and therefore they are incredibly brittle and do die very easily because they have no armor on that vehicle. So I go for Flak 88s instead. 12 strengths, way better than having a vehicle that can be one-shot by a machine gun from an aircraft. It just, to me, makes sense. So either way, let's move on to artillery. And artillery is, again, pretty light in this deck, like in this battle group. I start off with 1 mortar carrier, pretty much just to support my troops, kill 1,000 meter range AT guns if I need to, and other things like that. Pretty much A phase is about being defensive and also just making sure that you're taking out as much AT as possible for your phase B and C. I also have the card of Panzerwerfer you can get. The Panzerwerfer comes with 22 HE power 150mm rockets, and you can fire these in 5 rocket salvos, 10 rocket salvos, or however many rockets you want to fire at a time. You can do like pinpoint strikes if you want, try and fire 1 rocket at a time. Just fire them, move them in between, fire them again, and they have like 10 rocket salvos until they have to reload. So you can fire like 2 rounds, then you can fire 3 rounds, then you can fire 2 rounds, then you can fire 3 rounds, then the whole thing has to reload, and that takes forever, and then you can do the same again, or just do it like a whole 10 round salvo, or whatever. You can use these quite well to pin down enemy infantry and tank advances in phase A. So these are actually pretty nice defensive troop or unit, as opposed to an offensive. They become an offensive unit in phase B and C, but in phase A they're very much defensive. You might even bring one of these in at the start of the game just to stop infantry and stop the opponent from getting to a place that will cause you trouble. And that's what you use Panzerwerfers for. So you're being pushed by multiple infantry in a specific location, Panzerwerfer. You know, stop that where it is. Give yourself like a minute more in the game. It's all about saving time to the point where you can get to your phase C and get all those points that will allow you to crush your opponent. Moving on, I do have Hummels in phase C as my last card. And these guys are great for sniping AT guns at range. So 27 HE power is going to do a serious amount of damage to anything that a shell lands on. And they're just good for like, not even just sniping AT guns you can see, but attacking areas that you don't know where stuff is. So you suspect like a bush, just put a Hummel into it, like just blow that thing to pieces, and it's most likely to be pinned, if not killed, by a 27 HE shell. So that's what these guys are great for, and 2,800 meter range is more than enough to stay out of range of counter battery in most cases, so you should be good to use these fellas quite well. Now if we have a look at the other options in the phase B here, you get access to more mortars in phase B if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it, honestly. Wesp, maybe. This thing has a 15 HE power gun at 2,400 meter range. Possibly you could have some of these in phase B instead of the Hummel in phase C. The Wesp has more rate of fire, but less HE, basically. And the Wesp can also fire smoke, which can be really useful, actually. But I tend to try and keep my mortar half-track alive to use smoke from that. But if you're finding that your mortar half-track dies a lot, then bring in Wesps instead of Hummels, because smoke's actually sometimes a lot more useful than HE, especially for saving like a KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZbx. If it's being pinned to death, just smoke it and get it out of there like as soon as possible. Now the other things available are the BAO Panzer IV, the one that can call in off-map artillery. It's interesting because it's a 3-star Panzer IV, which is actually pretty damn decent for like your B phase, especially assisted by Befehl Panzer IV would be a 3-star Panzer IV, which is better than what you can get in your tank tab, right? So that is very tempting to bring these guys in, especially for like the off-map field battery. These are very cost-efficient units, but I feel like the specialist nature of the rest of my choices fits a lot better. Like having the Panzerwerfer in phase A is almost a must. And you definitely need mortar and smoke from phase A in most cases. The only thing that I would swap out is like a Hummel, but I actually really like the Hummel for supporting my tanks in phase C. If I find that I'm not using them because they cost too much, then I might downgrade to a Wesp. But a BAO Panzer IV costs more than a Hummel, and I find I use a Hummel way more throughout a match. So yeah, that's just my theory at the moment. Let's move on to the Air Tab. Air Tab's just about keeping your KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZbx alive. So I've got an ME-109 in phase A, pretty much to just help assist against like, you know, enemy air threat in Phase A. You know, if you're being harassed really hard by like a singular Spitfire, or I don't know, a singular rocket plane or bomber, maybe like a Mustang bomber, you can try and shoot them down with one of these. I think they're pretty decent 550 km/h speed airplanes to pick off units if they're getting a little over ambitious. And also you can invest in one of these to make your opponent over invest in aircraft and try and shoot it down, which is actually quite an interesting strategy. Make your opponents spend points on trying to dominate the air when ideally they should be pushing you on the ground in Phase A. Either way, it's something you can do. You can also get a Focke-Wulf 190G3, which can drop 4 5HE power bombs. I just find those bombs so useless that I would rather have the 550 km/h ME-109 with 1-star veterancy. Moving into Phase B, definitely need some fighters now. These fighters are extremely important for holding the skies and stopping your King Tigers from being destroyed. And honestly, what I'm going to do here is actually bring in a second card of them. Not going to have any Focke-Wulf 190G1s, which I did used to have, but I just find that the Focke-Wulf 190A8s with their good agility is just so much better than the Focke-Wulf 190G1, although that actually has good agility as well. So that's probably why I had it in the deck. Okay, well, there we go. You learn things every day. Even I'm still learning when I'm going through these sometimes. And yeah, so I have the Focke-Wulf 190G1. I had it because it's a bomber. It's a 15 HE power bomb. The main difference, I think, is the gun count, yeah. So you're sacrificing 4 HE power for a 15 HE power bomb. The rest of the stats pretty much stay the same other than the price. It costs you 50 points more to bring in a Focke-Wulf 190G1 with the 15 HE power bombs, but they're still great for helping you dominate the skies. So if you have like all of your Focke-Wulfs available, you can definitely contest most airplanes in Phase B and C. But not something I would count on too much. You won't be finding you're using your air tab too much unless you're being overwhelmed by air power, which only happens against certain battle groups. But either way, that's my air choices. You can bring in like an up-vetted Focke-Wulf 190, but you don't have enough cards. You need the availability in order to save, in order to actually have a presence in the air moving into the late game. So let's just save that and we will back out, and I'll talk you guys through what I would do with this deck in general on each phase. I've kind of talked about it as we've gone along, but Speertroop with Panzergrenadiers and Panzergrenadier and the MG42s, like straight off the bat, with a couple of Pak 38s is probably the best start you can go for. Then start reinforcing yourself with 258s, 231 or 2341s, more Speertroop. You know, basically all of your Phase A units you're going to be using. Bring in the Panzerwerfer probably quite early, if not at the start of the game, because it's really good for like helping you hold down a position and stopping your opponent from advancing. The mortar carrier, it's a choice as to whether you need it or not yet, because you're always going to want to have your mortar carrier at least at one point throughout the game, because it's the only thing you have to provide you with smoke. So moving into Phase B, if you end up getting yourself a KYAZdBlpKXcZhhmCGXYZbx, you want your mortar half-track to cover it with smoke on certain positions, or start mortaring enemy AT guns and stuff like that. You need it there. Yeah, moving into Phase B, this is when you bring in the rest of your Panzergrenadiers to help layer your defense. If you're being like pressured really hard, you can bring in those Panzergrenadiers. You can also bring in the Befehl Panzer IVs, and they can help you be pretty defensive as well. You can bring in the SBW232s to give you the extra command units that you need. Maybe if your Panzergrenadier have died, then use 232s to make up for that. If you're struggling for AT guns, which you probably shouldn't be at this point, but like a Pak 40 will do the job. You know, that will cut through most allied armor. And then basically it's about holding out until Phase C, where you have the insane income in order to bring in Jagdpanzers, Befehl Panthers, Königstiger, Panther A's, and the rest of your pioneers. And as you move into Phase C, you need to figure out what you need to do in order to support your King Tigers. It's all about just supporting them, keeping them alive, making sure they don't get stunned, and that they can kill their targets. So if you're up against like an airborne deck, they're going to be using airplanes, in which case you bring in your flak 88s and you bring in like 232s and your 2341 recon units to accompany it, because they can all, you know, target air targets with their 20mm autocannons, and the flak 88s will stun most units in 2 shots, like most light aircraft in 2 shots. Furthermore, you'll also be investing in your air tab to counter the enemy's air force. Whereas if you're struggling with 80 ambushes, then what you want to be doing is investing more in, like, again, SBW 2341s, but also more spear troop, and just in general more infantry. You want to just have that infantry there, sweeping through all of the tree lines and making sure you're not being ambushed at any point. And that's just so important. Even your Hummels as well. This is again where the long range artillery comes in handy. If you use your recon to find units on the ground that you can target with your Hummels and then push forwards and destroy it with your fire support, that's how you get your Königstiger out of a sticky situation. And again, it's the same with Air Force. You know, it's just about making sure you have the stuff to counter the decks you're playing against or the battle groups you're playing against. And that's pretty much what it comes down to with Panzer-Lehr. You've got to hold in phase A and B, you push in phase C, and take advantage of what you know about the current enemy status. So if they're pushing you hard with certain units, you start to bring in the units to counter those in phase C, and then you push back against them. Hopefully you haven't like basically sacrificed units by trying to move them far forwards. You always want to be like taking every little house you can and just plonking like an MG in it or a Panzer Grenadier squad there and leaving it there, you know, so that it becomes an issue for the opponents trying to push forwards. And then by the time they've dealt with that, hopefully it's moved into the next phase where you can reinforce with a little bit more stuff. And then in phase C, you just overwhelm them, right? That's the idea. And I think you guys, after this very long video, have hopefully got to grips with how the Panzer-Lehr works, in my opinion. Let me know what you guys think about my deck, what your variances are of this deck in the comments, of course, and I love reading those, so please let me know your thoughts. And in the meantime, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, and I will see you in the next video. Goodbye.